And we want the top slideshow. Well, at any rate, yeah, it works. So are you all able to see this? I guess you've muted, so presumably you can. First, I am talking about a stamp which came out on May 5th of 1938, so it's actually older than I am. And it was last delivered in 1959. So it's had over 20 years of use. Why did it come out? Well, in 1938, third-class mail was about 10% of the mail stream. Now, it wasn't all paid for at 1.5 cents. A lot of it was bulk mail and so on. But there was definitely a demand for this stamp, which would explain why in a group that is called the Prexies, and I hope you appreciate my hat from that standpoint, actually has Martha Washington on it. She wasn't our 1.5 Prexie, and if we had had one, it probably wouldn't have been a woman at the time, unfortunately. So she is one of 3 Prexie stamps which don't have presidents on them, of course. The 1/2 cent for Ben Franklin, the 1.5 cent for Martha Washington, and the 4.5 cent for the White House. This particular one, incidentally, I have my website up at the top because I was asked yesterday, would I post it? If you go to rdhinstl.com, there are several websites there. Go down to the bottom of the list and you will see the Prexie site. It's pretty obvious. This particular one, the only reason I am showing it is that it came out in June of 1938. So it is a sheet stamp and it is not an electric eye because the electric eye plates did not come out until, let's see, probably about 41, November 40. So after November 40, you can't be sure what you have, but before then, you do not have an electric eye stamp. This is, and you can tell because of the little area down at the bottom that has the markings on it. And that's the only way you can be absolutely sure that you've got an electric eye stamp. What is an electric eye stamp? Basically, it is a guide marker to guide the photoelectric cells that supposedly make the perforations a lot better so that you don't have the sort of thing that I'll show a little bit later. This particular item, in the first place, it has a blue border, and the ones that do come from my one-frame Martha Washington exhibit, in which I try to answer the question of why did they issue this stamp in the first place, and which is mostly just showing the uses or usages, and it's both actually. This one was mailed by someone who was in a Navy radio school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And it actually was sent free, but third-class mail was never free to our troops. Airmail, as you know, had the 6-cent concession rate, and after, April 1, 1942, regular first-class mail was free, but third-class mail was not. So the interesting thing about this would be that it was sent as third-class mail if there was no writing inside. I think somehow if he had scribbled a message on the outside of it so that the post office knew that it should be upgraded to first class mail, he might have been able to send it free. This is, well, there are 4 types of Martha Washington 1.5 cent stamps that you can collect. And one of them being the sheet stamps that I've already covered. There are 2 types of coil stamps. The one that you can find fairly commonly is the horizontal coil. This one I rather like. It's not in my exhibit, but apparently the group that mailed it, the Wisconsin Great Lakes Coal and Lock Company, tried mailing it without postage. And so since they were a company that probably made a large number of mailings, it was basically given back to them for postage. I don't know what the personal on it is. If I were the postmaster or whoever handled this, the Nixie clerk or whatever, I probably would have charged them first class postage instead of third class. This one I just sort of tossed in because this is what happens when you have an automatic machine that pretty much chops off your stamps as they come out of the roll, and then probably goes ahead, moistens them, and puts them on your mail, which in this case is not bulk mail, but it probably went out to 1,000 people. Why they didn't send it bulk, I don't know, but it makes a very interesting stamp. Most of us, if we saw that off cover, would feel it was uncollectible. On cover, it makes a rather neat little stamp to own. The rarity in the 1.5 cent Prexie is the vertical coil. And they are actually rarer than the 10-cent coil. Bill DiPaolo has written on that fairly recently in the USS Journal, but they are a lot less expensive. You could probably find something like this in a $1 box, whereas you're unlikely to find your solo 10-cent coil there. The True Val Trading Company is not philatelic, but I tried Googling them and all I could get was people who made shirts, and I don't think this is the same group, and also some current group now in New York called True Val Company that will buy your gold from you probably at about 50% of the going price. But at least it's not philatelic as we would think of that. The last time I showed this, incidentally, Mr. Shapiro told me I had too many philatelic covers in there, so I ended up taking one of them out. This is the 4th type of collectible Martha Washington, and that is the Canal Zone overprint. This particular one is not philatelic either. It had actually the contents, which were a missionary group basically asking for support. So the use of it, even though it has a dated cancel, which is sort of interesting, but this is a legit use. So we have seen the 4 types of stamps. Then what kind of interesting uses can you get? This is one that I really have only seen this particular copy. You can get without too awfully much trouble censored covers going into Santa Fe and this one to the regular P.O. Box 1663. There are several others, but they are basically 3-cent stamps, and most of those will be Win the War, as I understand it. And for those of you like Jeff who collects the Win the War covers, that's fine. But in this particular case, I wanted this because I've not seen third-class mail going in. Fourth class, I understand there was a fair amount that one of the catalog companies was wondering why this particular post office box wanted hundreds of their catalogs, but that probably would have been fourth class mail. Third class military is kind of interesting. This one is not the best way to show it, but Postal Order 19687 came out basically on January 7th, 1943, because third class mail and fourth class mail was clogging the APO system. And you can kind of see why, because this is probably the Seminole Stamp Company either sending approvals or like I used to get when I was a kid, a little leaflet which showed you pictures of all these stamps you could order. And what Order 19687 basically said is you can't send third or fourth class mail unless the recipient had asked for it specifically. And I understand that if you sent a letter asking for your family to send you razor blades and cigarettes and a couple of pencils or something like that, the post office clerk would ask to see the letter and would cancel the letter with a normal postal canceller, so you couldn't bring it back again next week and use the same letter. In this particular case, the Seminole Stamp Company did not go through. At one time when I showed this, someone actually was arguing with one of the judges who was talking to me at the frames and saying, this is a philatelic cover and it should not be in there. And the judge was trying to explain to him that's precisely why it is in there. And I don't think anyone ever particularly won that. This is one sent from an APO, but the interesting thing on it, the APO incidentally in Glasgow, Scotland, and the interesting thing about it is it's like a turned cover. It was originally sent to someone at the APO, and down at the bottom, it says it was mailed in conformity with Post Office Order 19687. So it was possible to send things in. We have no idea what was sent. Then we get to another set of usage, which in the third class was miscellaneous objects. In my exhibit, I have a wooden dog, which does manage to fit. I was a little worried originally when I first put it in there that the frame glass would close over it. So when I actually took it to the show, I had an alternate title page just in case I couldn't do that. But this particular sort of thing, I would think today is not even mailable. And this came out of Bremerton, Washington in 1943. I'm not sure exactly what kind of token it is. This particular bit of miscellaneous objects, however, is one of the nicer items in the exhibit. And it actually is in, even though I was able to get rid of all the blue border on it. This is probably one of the only third-class items mailed out of Wake in May of, or out of Wake actually, before the Japanese took over, overran it. And I hope that the kid that sent it got out of there before December of 41, but you can't really tell whether he did or not because he didn't actually put his name on there. And so it is basically, you know, he kind of put everything like Uhaloa, Honolulu on the thing. And it's actually canceled in Honolulu, but it has a Wake Island territory of Hawaii return address. So I would think that anybody who collects Second World War type things would find this a very useful item in their collection. Unsealed greeting cards are probably the most common use of the 1.5 cent Prexie. Particularly, this one is in the exhibit, and actually I found something in one of the Savannah, Georgia newspapers of December 18th, 1943, which says, "Fire in a mail-packed storeroom at the Union Station here today wiped out a big slice of Christmas for hundreds of persons." This is an interesting item, incidentally, to mount. The first time I think I had it in there when I started taking my pages out, it went sailing out and went down on the floor, and there is a fair amount less of it now than there was the first time I showed it. This one is not in the exhibit, but it is kind of an interesting item. It was sent special delivery, and the problem with, and it was unsealed, and I was trying to figure out why was there 1.5 cents due, and then Steve Suffett explained it to me very easily that special delivery on anything that was not first class at the time would have been 15 cents, not 10 cents. So what the problem really is the special delivery stamp. But the postal clerk was being nice, and instead of charging 5 cents postage due, uprated this to first class, which meant adding an additional 1.5 cents, and sent it that way. There is no postage due stamp on it or any indication that it actually went, or that actually any postage due was collected. So perhaps the postal people in Austin, Texas were equally nice. This is also an unsealed greeting card, which undoubtedly did not get to the recipient anywhere near in time. It shows the problem with abbreviating Indiana as INDA, because this thing over at the side is a Bombay, India censorship, and it went to the Bombay Dead Letter Office and sat there a while before they decided to send it back to the United States. This is another way that you can get censorship for something mailed in the United States and sent to someone in the United States. This particular card, it was an Easter card probably, that came out of Fort Lincoln internment camp in Bismarck, North Dakota in 1942, and is censored by the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. Now, people in the normal detention camps did not have censorship. But so this one kind of attracted me. And what this was a camp for resident Japanese nationals who were in the United States, and they were, I think some of them could sign loyalty oaths and come out, but if they were not, they were kept in Bismarck, North Dakota, which is probably even colder than Northfield in the winter. This particular item came out of the Philippines in 1941, and luckily for the people that sent it, they sent it in November of 1941, November 19th, in fact, because after December 7th, virtually no mail could get out of our bases in the Philippines unless it was taken out by submarine, and I'm quite sure Christmas cards would not be very high on the list for that particular treatment. This is the best item I have in my collection it's probably in my collection of this material and in the exhibit. I do not, however, mark it as being important in the exhibit because it is simply a territorial Christmas card. The reason, though, I do bold the description of it so that judges can't miss it, because it is one of the 3 known Christmas cards that are out of Honolulu, December 7th, 1941. The post office was told to stay open so that people in the city of Honolulu didn't get too panicked that the city was being invaded. But, and I would think that there would have been a fair number of Christmas cards actually canceled there in that morning. I have seen the other 2. One of them is split apart and looks vaguely like the mice had been at it. And the third one is probably in about the same shape as this, a little more roughly opened, I think. So I can still claim this is the best of the 3 known. There are probably under 10 known pieces of mail that actually were canceled on December 7th in Honolulu. Foreign printed matter is the next usage that would have needed a 1.5 cent stamp. It actually began in April 1 of 1932 at 1.5 cents, and it stayed until November 1st, 1953. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the domestic third-class single-piece mail went to 2 cents on January 1st, 1949. So the message basically was send your junk mail abroad, because it went another 2.5 years at a cheaper rate. This one I have in the exhibit because apparently the stamp was stuck to the backing. And the Esterline Angus Company decided they were not going to waste it. So they chopped off the liner and pasted the whole thing when sending the mail to Canada. This particular item is in the exhibit because the Thavano Company sent their mail abroad using the vertical coil stamps. And that's a little unusual to find. This is 1951. It's somewhat late in the period, but again, the 1.5 cent stamps were, and we'll see why in a little bit, actually delivered for another 8 years. This is not in the exhibit, but I kind of think it's interesting. It is 2 Esperanto leaflets that were stapled together and sent off. Normally, they looked like they would have been mailed at some sort of second or third class PL&R, but PL&R's, that sort of PL&R could not be used to send anything foreign. UPU basically said you must put a stamp on it. So they they stapled 2 of them together, stamped it with a 1.5 cent Marth Washington, and sent these off to the Russian zone of Germany. Now, the thing that really fascinates me about it is that when somebody left the Russian zone of Germany, they brought this out with them. Why? I don't know, but I'm perfectly happy to have it. This is an example of a penalty envelope, and again, the UPU would not recognize a penalty, well, just the fact that it's a penalty envelope. So again, the government in Washington had to put a 1.5 cent stamp on it and send it off, in this particular case, in 1941 to Nazi Germany. So it has this nice cancel on the front of it. And it is has some kind of an electric eye marking on the bottom, which is probably the 3rd plate type of thing. This particular one is a canal zone stamp used to send something to Costa Rica. And it was a lodge notice, so it's, again, not a philatelic use of the canal zone stamp. And having been sent in 1944, it received a censor tape from the US. It may well have it should have gone through Miami all the way over, because a lot of the mail to places like Costa Rica did have to go through there, if not all of it, and it probably got airmail treatment. This is a greeting card sent to someone at the printed matter rate. In fact, they knew obviously that it should go as printed matter and wrote that up here. Your greeting cards sent abroad could have up to 5 words of common greeting, like, Merry Christmas, you could scribble on it. And so this sender just wrote best regards, signed it, and sent it off to Tunis at half of the normal 3 cent cost to send a foreign postcard. The sender, if Louis Fizet were here, but I don't think he is, he would notice who the sender was, Alfred Smith of Honolulu. Alfred Smith and his wife were Nazi sympathizers, shall we say, and very vocal about it, and ended up being in various camps, being put away in various camps until about 1943. So you can get very interesting mail from Alfred Smith in some sort of camp in the US, sending it off to his wife, who was generally kept in a camp just outside of Honolulu. Forwarding. Let's see my time, 9:06. I need to go a little faster probably, but I tend to mark something like this as rare. You can find forwarded greeting cards very commonly, but forwarded junk mail is not common at all. I probably have about 5 examples of it, and I've been collecting this kind of material, particularly the 1.5 cent stamp, for at least 20 years or more. This one I kind of like, incidentally, because it has the 4th Bureau as well as the 5th Bureau, or otherwise known as Prexie, on it. This particular one is not in the exhibit, but I rather like it because it says this is the, let's see, the exact wording. Well, this is the material for which postage was sent. And Leonie apparently, very typically, said she was from Lakeville, Texas. The post office basically said, advise correspondents or publishers of your exact address. And the postmaster or mistress got a little unhappy and scribbled on your address is not Lakeview, Texas. This is the type of greeting card forwarding, one of the 2 types that could be done without extra postage. There is an unfortunately very hard to read change of address due to official orders. If you had been moved from one place to the other by the government, they would move the mail and send it after you without extra charge. This one is kind of interesting because it was actually sent to the person in the Department of Agriculture in Honolulu, and there it was censored by the Information Control Board, or the ICB, if that's the right name of the ICB, and sent off to the Soil Conservation Service in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So it was a 2-ocean cover. This is the other way that you could forward something without extra postage, and that is if you were forwarding it to an address in the same post office. This person just moved from one place to the other within the Williamsport postal system, so they just went ahead and forwarded it without an additional 1.5 cents. This kind of forwarding I particularly like because it was originally sent as bulk mail for 1 cent, but when it was forwarded to general delivery in Cincinnati from wherever it went originally, it had to have a 1.5 cent stamp added, because the rules were no matter what rate it went out at, if it was forwarded 3rd-class mail, it needed full, regular 3rd-class postage to forward it. And that is my understanding too, is if it was 2nd-class mail, it also had to be forwarded at the full 3rd-class rate. We won't get into that at the moment. This one puzzles me as to what they were doing. The College of Worcester mailed off their alumni letters at 2nd-class mail. And they sent this one to someone who was at a weather station on Canton Island after the Second World War. This particular this station was run by the British and Americans jointly, and apparently had several people in it. The rest of the island was given up to the Goonie birds. And this particular one was sent at 1.5 cents. I can't find what 2nd-class rate they thought they were paying. So it is quite possible that they saw Canton Island on there and said, oh, this is foreign mail, and slapped a 1.5 cent stamp on it. If so, it would be very interesting because it was transferred by official orders back to the guy in Honolulu, which would have been outgoing at the foreign printed matter rate and forwarding at a domestic third class rate. I'm not sure at the moment. I've got to figure out whether there is any way they think they mailed it at second class. This is incoming mail from, or incoming Christmas card from a British sort of detention camp, which is Hutchinson Camp on the Isle of Man. And it contained a Christmas card, which I have, that was designed by the artist Kurt Schwitters, who was a refugee in England at the time, but the English didn't exactly trust him, so they sent him to this particular camp. This was the kind of camp where the people could go in to the pubs in town for the evening and come back to camp. And Schwitters apparently had an art studio outfitted for him there so he could continue to paint and make things like the Christmas cards. But apparently he absolutely detested it. This is a forwarding of a commercial third-class mail, which came into the United States from Guatemala, was censored. It came into Hibbing, Minnesota. It got domestic censoring in Chicago and was sent back out because by the time it got to Hibbing, Minnesota, the person had gone to Costa Rica. So a 1.5 cent stamp was added to forward it back out of the country. There were several other 1.5 cent rates which did not exist in 1938 when the stamp was issued. In my exhibit, I call them opportunists because they got 1.5 cent rates assigned to them after the stamp was issued. This particular rate is a 4th class book rate that was in existence from November 1st, 1938 to July 1st of 1942. So it is not too easy to find. It was only around for about 3 years, 1.5 cents per pound of books. And this one actually had the book in it. So it did have the requisite number of pages, what have you. I don't know what the forwarding did, but it was apparently forwarded within the same post office, so no additional postage was needed. Books, catalogs, and material for planting came into being in January 1, 1948, when the basic rate went to 2 cents. But you could still send catalogs that had more than 13 pages and books that had more than 13 pages and material for planting. I've not been able to find a case of material for planting. It would almost have to be seeds to be light enough to be 1.5 cents. If anybody has one, I would love to acquire it from you. This particular one, by the time it was mailed, it got a 1999 cancel. By the time it was mailed, it would have cost 2 cents if it was regular third class, so it had to go out under this special rate. Then we come along and we have the real resurgence of the 1.5 cent stamp, or why it was around as long as it was. And that is because 1.5 cent became the minimum bulk rate on July 1, 1952. And it stayed as the minimum bulk rate piece until January 1, 1959. So that's why 1.5 cent stamp Prexies were continuing to be sent out to the post offices, most of them probably pre-cancels up till that. This is the normal 34.66 PLNR. This is a, you can't probably read it, but it is a 39 CFR 34.66 bulk rate designation that was in effect from July 1st, 1954 to December 21st, 1954. I would love to find, oh no, I'm sorry, this is not, this is the territorial rate. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sent out of Honolulu. This is the special one that was only around for less than 3 months. I went to Norman Thetford. Norman Thetford was obviously a stamp collector. I don't think he was a dealer, and saved all of his mail. You can find a lot of it. I would like to find something sent to somebody else, but this was sent from the Equitable Life Assurance Society, so I don't think it was really philatelic mail. Sorry, Jeff. And the very last one is bulk rate, came into being on December 21st, 1954, and was around for some time after that. Postcards never had a special bulk rate mailing rate. So this particular one probably was used, I would think, in 54 or 55, because it still had postcard on it. And by then, if it was 1954, it would have cost them 2 cents to send it as a postcard, but if they sent it as bulk rate, it was 1.5. If it was a few years later, it would have cost them 3 cents, but they could send it for 1.5. So this is basically a look at the 1.5 cent rates. My website, again, for those of you who wanted it, go to rdhinstl.com. You can probably see all of these covers there, plus a few more, and a lot of others which are single Prexie usages. And it is, again, usages, because I try to show each of the different types of uses of each of the stamp. So go ahead and unmute your Zoom, and if there's anything I can do in the next 10 minutes for you, I will be happy to.
Bob, thank you for a wonderful show. This is why I think many of Prexie people love this stamp. It is, in most cases, a very common stamp, but if you've got a little philatelic knowledge, you can find yourself some very rare material. And I'd just like to put in a positive for philatelic material. I love philatelic material. I just give Bob a hard time about it. One of my definitions of philatelic is if I don't own it, it's philatelic. But if you now have any questions for Bob, he is our expert. And of course, if he doesn't have the answer, he'll make something up.
Exactly.
Do you have any covers where the 1.5 cent stamp was used to pay postage due?
I think I have one. There was a company, well, if you sent out third-class mail in a lot of cases, and the bulk mail, you had to put on there that you would pay return postage. And that was usually a postage due stamp that went back. But I do have one that used the 1.5 cents when they sent the return postage back. So that's probably the closest that I have. I'd have to look actually to see whether I do have anything where it's just, out of a clear blue sky, they put a 1.5 instead of a postage due on it.
Anybody else?
Anyone else want to
Yeah,
ask about a simple stamp?
try to get Bob fluxy. Ask a tough question. Okay, well, this is a good group. Bob, they know everything, or they just learned everything from you. So,
Okay. Jeff,
yes.
not on the subject, but I just got an email that said from Bill Schultz that said Alan Warren fell and broke his hip this morning and is in the hospital.
Oh dear.
Oh my
Yes,
God.
he sent me an email too.
Yeah.
He tripped and I
Right.
think he's broken his hip.
Oh my God. Well, see what happens when you don't collect Prexies?
I think you see what happens when you're trying to be nice and throw a tennis ball back into somebody's tennis court. And he slipped.
I'll remember that when I start to exercise.
Yes.
All right, well, let's just go out to him. I will send a card. I hope all of you do also. Any other happy news?
I have another question
Go for it.
about the exhibit. One of the things that has interested me is that to have a really good exhibit, quote, good exhibit, you need extraneous stuff. In your exhibit, do you have anything such as a die proof or essays that were considered but not used and things like that?
No, I think there are 2 proofs of the Martha Washington stamp. One of them was in an exhibit. The exhibitor has died. I don't know where that one went. The other, I think I had seen, and I thought just basically, I don't need it for this. I am showing basically uses or usages. Again, trying to separate the two. In my mind, it's a use if the stamp is on there. It's a usage when I am showing the 3rd class use and, the Christmas card, that is a usage sort of thing. And the stamps are actually used for any given cover. So at any rate, no, I just felt like I don't need that sort of thing. So I didn't go really seriously looking for it or tell Jim Lee to, please find it and sell it to me.
Glenn, that's important to remember. It's up to the exhibitor to decide what he's going to do, especially now that we've changed, or at least Canada has changed how we exhibit. So Bob chose what he wanted to show, and he showed it.
But
Okay.
if you're hunting for medals, isn't what the judge wants more important than what you want?
No.
Shouldn't be.
No, Elizabeth, would you get the gun out and take care of this man?
What?
Uh,
No, I mean,
I'll-
it's up
yeah.
to, it's the judge, judges how well you have described what you're going to do.
Okay.
So it's up
And
to
I'll-
you. You tell us what you're going to show us and we'll tell you how well we think you've done it.
Well, in Bob's case, he's won single frame grands with his exhibit.
Yeah.
I was going
Guess
to
that
say,
makes too much for not
So
having a proof.
he must be doing
Proof would
something
part
right.
of the story.
Well, the only reason I say that is one of the times I exhibited on a national level. I have a small die proof of the 2-cent Lake Placid 1932 stamp. And a judge said to me, well, it's very nice, but we couldn't give you a higher level because you don't have the large die proof. And I said to him, well, there are only 2 known in private hands, and they're both in museums. And he says, well, that's not our problem. That's your problem. So
Glenn, I
How long
think
ago was
I think Liz and some of us judges are going to have to sit down and maybe do some sort of information about exhibiting and judging and things like that. But that's for another show.
Yes.
Hey, I didn't mean to waylay the subject.
But you did, so we'll get you for
Well,
it.
I tend to have a problem with that. That's why I mute myself a lot. But I found it very interesting, the exhibit. Very nice.
Thank you.
No, and it's nice to know that Bob knows what he's talking about and can convey it. And I'm hoping that the people here learned a lot. And I'm sure Bob doesn't want any more competition, but I'm sure Bob will help any of you if you have any questions. All right, we're getting near the end. I don't want to have the wrath of Liz Heisey, so I just like to say thank you all for coming. I'd like to remind you that tomorrow from 2 to 3, Chip Briggs will be talking about local letter usages. And again, talk about common stamps. I've seen Chip's exhibit and material. It's absolutely wonderful. And I hope if you don't fall asleep from all the brunches you're going to be having, that you come and join us. Again, 2 to 3 here at your famous Sarasota network.
Thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you.
Liz,
Thank you.
will you officially,
I will officially dismiss you.
no, will you let us know about how we might be able to get a hold of the recording?
I am sending it to a guy and he is manipulating them, so I will get back to you as soon as I know a bit more.
Perfect. Again, thank you all for coming, and see you tomorrow.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Bob.
Goodbye.
Hi all.